So listen, y'all. I will say that I've been waiting 15 years to do this class, and or to see today's class happen. And that'll make sense in a couple minutes. But I am going to introduce someone who's really special to me, who is going to introduce someone who is really special to us, and in particular to her. So I am going to introduce my wife, who is going to be moderating the class today, having a conversation with somebody. And something about my wife that I guess, if I could just sum it up, because I don't want to take a lot of time. So we've been together since 1986. She was 21, I was 25. We met at Rutgers University. And pretty quickly, we were on an odyssey together. And we fell in love, and we fell in love really hard. It was a journey, an epic journey, I would say. And we've been together ever since. And something about my wife that I guess I would like to say is, you know, I think people have spouses or people who they have life partners, and there's always really positive things that, you know, we'd like to say about them. I don't have enough positive things to say, right? I would run out of words. But just a really special person, and I say that she's the smartest person who I've ever met, but certainly one of the smartest. And she is, I say she's the smartest, but she wouldn't say that, but that's okay. And a really, really special human being. And she's going to introduce you to somebody today who is a friend of ours, but in particular a friend of hers. And I will say, as a person who's watching this relationship unfold, has been watching it for 15 years, but have been able to have a really up-close look at it, take a different turn in the past several months, I will say that it is the most, I would like to say beautiful relationship, but that doesn't really capture it. It is the most awe-inspiring friendship that I have ever experienced in my life. And today is the first day that they're going to speak publicly about their friendship. Just be together in a public setting, which is just awesome. And I think I can't, if I keep going, it's not going to work. So, Laurie Lynn, Dr. Mulvey. Yeah, why don't you just stand up and then we'll do. This is Laurie, by the way. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I guess I got to meet this class last week it was, right?
You did.
We were here. So now I really get to meet you, and this is going to be good. So are you going to stay out here, Sam?
I'm not going to stay here. I will not stay here. We're going to do top hat as we're standing here, and
Okay.
you and I will just make small talk while they're busy doing what people often do on their phones, which is
Okay.
look at them and
Okay.
punch numbers into them and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Hit submit and all the other kinds of things that they do. I will say just to you, it's not on. Lily, start it over maybe. All right, Mom. Laurie Lynn,
Do we have to talk while they're doing it?
Nah, we don't, but we just talk. Like, let them eavesdrop on our relationship for a hot minute.
Okay.
So,
You didn't say my name. I mean, just at the end you said Laurie
I
Lynn.
did. Laurie Lynn Mulvey, a.k.a. Laurie Lynn. So, all right.
Hi, Mr.
Mr.
Rashidi.
Rashidi, we say hello. All right, you are on, my friend.
Okay. That's it. Just like that. Everybody here? So, first of all, I've never had the floor in Social 119, and this class has been going on since 1991. So this is a big day. Also, my dad is here, so that's cool. And I'm really happy to have him. And so I will say you're gonna all be very happy that you're here today. And like Sam said, I too have been waiting for this moment, not even believing it would happen for 16 years actually. So I'm gonna introduce my dear friend, Irvin Moore. And before I do, I just wanna say that the title of the class is Real Justice. So we're not here just to talk about friendship, we're actually here to talk about justice. And I'll say something about that, and you'll understand in a few minutes why. But it's gonna be a case study, and you will remember it, trust me. So how I met my friend Irvin Moore is 16 years ago, I started taking my students, facilitators, World in Conversation facilitators, as part of their training to Rockview, the state prison down the road that many of you probably pass when you come into town. And there, in dialogues, I met Irvin. We were having dialogues between our facilitators and some members of the Lifers organization, and that is people at Rockview who have a life sentence. Because in Pennsylvania, if you take a life, you get life. No parole. That's Pennsylvania. So we got to meet over semesters in small groups with some of the men at Rockview who have life sentences, and Irvin Moore was one of them. And what stood out when I met Irvin, first of all, I thought this person should be narrating documentary films. That's just like immediately, I just felt like, what is he doing here? But the other thing is, I always felt like it was a holy encounter. Like I was in temple or something. There was just something about him that was really intriguing in terms of the way he saw things. It definitely wasn't what I expected. And I got to have a lot of experiences with men at Rockview who had life sentences. And like all of us, were really surprised by the men that we met there. And there are lots of different people, lots of different stories, and lots of different ways of taking on a life sentence. But we met a lot of quality humans there, and that really changes the way I understand that place that I drive by, you know, going out Route 26. It's like I have friends in there, you know? It's not just a place anymore. So I just want to say really quickly, and then he's going to come up here. Irvin grew up in Philadelphia, and when I met him, he had already, I did the math before, he had already been imprisoned for 41 years. 41 years. That was just mine, 41 years behind the wall, inside. And he grew up, as I've come to know, in a family with 2 parents, siblings, a big sister that took care of him while his parents were working hard. His dad was a trucker. I also learned that when Irvin talked to his mom once about welfare, she almost slapped him across the face when he mentioned the word, because she said, we don't do welfare in this family. But something started to happen in our communities back in those years, which was the 1960s, which was in the Black community. People were becoming educated about their history and waking up to who they were and where they truly came from and what had happened to their people here. And then also heroin was coming into the communities and the things that it was doing things to the communities, and Irvin was in the middle of all of that. And somewhere quickly in his young life, by the age of 22, a homicide had been committed, and he got a life sentence. And so we're going to talk about what is justice, how is justice served with somebody who has been in the prison system for 52 years. He was released in March of this year. And so he voted today for the first time in his life on campus at the Hub, right? So this is big. So Irvin Moore, please join me and Soch 119 to talk about all the things that you have learned in this time. It is a pleasure to have you here. Oh, just.
The pleasure is mine.
Is there anything you want to add to?
Wait a minute. Can you hear me?
That's an inside joke for Sam,
Can you
by the
hear
way.
Now, the reason I say this, because I was instructed not to. Whatever you do, don't be unprofessional enough to take that mic and put it to your mouth and say, "Can you hear me?" Now, this was instructed to me by a professor, Sam Richards, a man who I respect, a man who I know has unbridled passion about his vocation, and who is an intellectual giant. So, first chance I get, I'm going to say, "Can you hear me?" Because that's part of who I am.
So we should also introduce Frederick.
Oh, of course. This is Frederick, my companion. This is Fred, Big Head Fred. As you will see, he follows me because he loves me. He loves me because he came from a lifetime of abuse and found love for the first time in my cell in Rockview. So I just held him in my arms, took my mattress from my cot and put it on the floor and laid down with him for 3 days to bond. Because he was so abused. 3 years of his life, that's all he knew, until he came to Rockview and found me. He came to a penitentiary, a place of ostracization, solitude, pain, longing, want, and he found love. Now, it's a dichotomy there, because you say, what do you guys think about penitentiaries, what you see on television, of course, and they're bad places. I'd be one of the first people to let you know I do not want to see penitentiaries razed to the ground, because we need them. I was in the penitentiary for 52 years. 52 years of my life, 52 years, probably or maybe longer than some of your mothers and fathers have been alive. I went to the penitentiary when I was 22 years old, before man had even walked on the moon, before Woodstock, and I don't even know if you know what that is. But you're smart people, so I know you do. But I went before then. I went before McDonald's. I'm from Philadelphia. McDonald's had not reached Philadelphia at that time. I went to the penitentiary before personal computers. The only computer I had ever heard about was something called ENIAC, and it was maybe as big as half this room. No such thing as a personal computer. Rotary phones, pack of cigarettes, and everybody smoked in those days, was 28 cents. A hamburger was 25 cents.
In other words, it's just an unimaginable amount of time.
Oh,
You can't imagine 52 years, really.
It was another era.
And so I just want to share that
Well,
I have had the privilege, really, something you could never, I would have never guessed, of walking through the experience of a human from imprisonment to freedom. And, 52 years I feel like I'm with a new human, but he's not an infant.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And he's so many things are new. And so to see the world anew through an adult who
Indeed.
has wisdom
Indeed.
in his soul is a really profound experience. So I want to just turn us toward some of these questions
course.
of justice, because I do, especially, I mean, probably every generation has a focus of what and a call for justice, right? And so, but what also happens in the middle of that is sometimes we don't actually even ask ourselves, what is justice? We just know that we're moving toward it or away from it, right? And so, Irvin, we're going to talk about a case, right? Irvin is the offender in a particular case. We're not talking about systems right now, but this is in part to talk about how complex this thing called justice might be. So that's what. So I'm going to ask you some questions just to help us talk about it. But I want to get to two things today. One is punitive justice, and the other is restorative justice. Because if you haven't heard those terms, those are very different ways of thinking about how justice is served. One is punishment, and one is restoring relationships. How do we restore something after it's been broken, right? When a life has been taken, is there a possibility to restore something? Or is there just punishment? Or is there both? I don't know. So can you just say how much you think someone has to pay for their offense, first of all, just to get us into the punishment realm?
Ideally.
And thinking about yourself.
Of course. Ideally, it has to do with the individual. So someone or some system or some process has to determine the amount of growth, development, change, the amount that this individual, whoever this individual may be, me in this case, has grown to the degree where he's no longer a danger or a threat to his community.
So, okay, danger and threat. Can you just start there about yourself? Just because we're going to ask you to be personal, and then we're going to zoom out from there.
Well,
so how much of a danger were you in those days, or a threat?
Whether or not I was a danger at all, according to my record, I was. According to what was on paper, somewhere, I was.
What was it? Why? What were they? What was listed there?
In my community, there was something that was loosely termed from playground to prison pipeline. I first had my first run-in with the criminal justice system when I was 11 years old. A group of friends and I, we were walking through a park. We were going to play.
Was this the day that was your birthday?
No, pardon me. I'm talking about the criminal justice system, not the police.
Okay.
I had another occasion to run in with police, but this was different. And for some reason, the spam people have been after me. First and foremost, I want to say that this is a miraculous device. I stay up at night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, because I'm determined that this will not master me. I'm also determined that I will not be caught walking in the middle of the street and hit by a bus because I have my face glued in this. So quite often, my family, my friends, my loved ones say, "We've been trying to call you. Where have you been?" I said, "My phone was off." I said, I had it in my pocket, and it was off. That's okay. But getting back to my story, I had my first run-in with the criminal justice system at 11, going through the park, a group of us, and we were stopped by the police and asked, were we just at a certain location, which was a bridge overlooking a certain highway. And of course, we said, yeah, we were there. We were looking over and looking at the cars, and he said, "Okay, come with me. Everybody get in the car." Took us to the police station, and we were accused of throwing rocks at cars, which we had not done. We just did not do that. And there was nothing we could say otherwise. I went to reform school because of that.
You went
At
to a
11.
reform school because of
I
that?
went to reform school because of that. And I'll let no one tell me that there's anything rougher, more cruel, more unjust, more humiliating, dehumanizing, more violent than a juvenile institution, because there's not. We all know how children can be. But children monitored and directed and guided and led into those lives by adults, and we have some strange adults that take positions like that. Not all of them, but we do have that. So that was my introduction to the criminal justice system at 11 years old. And
So you were punished for something that you didn't do?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And but my point I'm making is that that introduction has been with me for I'm 75 years old, just in case anybody want to ask. I know I don't look it. I know I don't act it. And I can still move around. I'm not on medication or anything like that. And when people ask me why, inevitably, I have to say, well, I haven't drank liquor in 52 years. I haven't smoked in decades and decades. I don't do drugs. I don't hang out at night. And I don't know if you're old enough to hear this, but I haven't really had that much sex in a long, long time.
Oh, wait, Irvin, just keep that closer to your, this?
So I feel great. Physically.
Okay, so I just want to put a little seed into all of our thoughts. So just imagine if, Irvin, you grew up, or we grew up in a system that was a restorative system. Even the incident that he actually wasn't guilty of, you wouldn't have been punished for it. You would have been called into a community meeting, and you would have figured out with other community members who had been hurt by the rocks being thrown at their cars what these young boys could do to right what had been wronged.
Well, see,
right? But in our system, we only have punishment for the very most part.
Well,
so
we have very few examples of restorative systems. Not saying that we don't have them or have never had them, because when I first came into the adult criminal justice system, you guys can believe everything you've seen and heard on television, because that was off the chain. I was 22 years old, so basically I was your age. I was a kid. I thought I knew everything, but I was a kid. And to be thrust into a system like that, have any of you guys seen Shawshank Redemption?
Who has? Just for the fun of it.
Has anyone seen it?
Oh,
A lot of people have seen
okay.
it. Well, tell your buddies to watch it. And then remember this conversation today. Because when it first came on, that's exactly how it was when I walked into the adult criminal justice system, the adult prisons. No radio, nowhere. No TVs, nowhere. No library, no contact visits, none.
So can I?
Wait a minute.
Okay.
I just want to lay the groundwork for this, and then we can go to your questions, because it's important that you understand that that was another world. Literally, we did not talk to the staff or the guards. They did not talk to us. To do so was dangerous, and the place itself, by its very nature, was dangerous. And I'm a kid, and rape was rampant. And as Laurie said, I had just came from a system where we had begun to be educated in my community as to who we were as a people. And we were being politicized. We were being educated as to our connection to something called the motherland and greatness, Songhai Empire, the Mali Empire, Timbuktu, Benin, the Library of Alexandria. We had never known anything about that in regards to us. We were also practicing self-defense in our communities, and being taught not to be afraid of a living ass.
Say that again?
Not to be afraid of a living thing.
Okay. No, I just, did you say ass?
I said ass.
Okay,
I said
okay.
ass.
I thought so.
But see, these are adults. These are
Of course.
adults.
No,
And
it's all good.
so I came from a changing system, a dynamic system. So when we came into the penitentiary with what had been occurring for decades and decades and decades, we were not having it. We were not being preyed upon. Believe me. And we had to do some things to save ourselves. But it changed the philosophy. It changed the mindset in there. It let people know that what was happening and what had been happening was not okay. Just like out here, where you guys are at. Whatever is happening in your communities, whatever is happening in your neighborhoods, in your families, in your personal relationships, does not have to continue. Oh.
Except getting spam calls.
Except
That has to
getting
continue.
spam
But wait,
calls.
okay, so Irvin, now I'm going to interrupt. It's another spam call.
Unknown callers. How do y'all put up with this? Someone has to show me a remedy for this.
Okay, so, but before, so Irvin has a lot to say, and it was a key figure in change in the prison system, and particularly education, bringing education into the prisons. But we're not going to talk about that right now, because it's a whole lifetime's work that is important to recognize that he was part of. But I really want to stay with the questions that come from a person going into a prison because they've committed an offense, and clearly we also talked about an offense you didn't commit, but let's talk about the offense you did commit.
Okay.
And let's just start with, is prison a response to homicide? Because I really want to just dig in.
Okay. What I started to say before I got sidetracked, which I tend to do every now and then because people say I can talk. And I'm starting to do it again, but I will get back to your question. And which is, initially, prisons punished. Prisons punished. Punished.
Wait, hang on. I'm going to stop you again. Okay. Don't just talk about you right now. In other words, when you, at 22, I think it was, when you got gavel down life sentence, was that justice? I mean, the taking of a life and then the, quote, sacrifice of another life into the prison system. What part of that is justice? What part of that is just?
Again, you have to understand that systems are set up and systems become institutionalized so that they run on their own.
Yeah, but
I know, but you
I know-
said, is it justice?
for you, like,
Well, of course not. It was not. I did not consider that justice. I called it unfair.
and
I said,
exactly,
I
what
said
was
to
unfair?
myself, I did not do what they accused me of at 11 years old.
Right, yep.
But by the time I was 22, I had did that. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? So
No, say more, make it explicit. I don't know what you mean.
I had,
I mean, when you say, do you know what I mean? I don't.
okay, well, when I was 22 years old, I took a life. When I was 22 years old, I caused someone's death. When I was 22 years old, I unintentionally, and I use that word explicitly, I unintentionally caused someone to lose their life. Now, whether or not those were my intentions or not, someone lost their life. And so there was a price I had to pay. I understood that. I recognized that. Now, Laurie's question is, should that have happened?
Wait, can I ask it a better question?
Of course.
Looking at it, what was the price you should pay if you look at your 22-year-old self?
Mm-hmm.
What's the price for that incident? that unintentional death?
I wish a system had been devised, set up, of diagnostic and evaluation that could have determined 30 years ago that I was ready to leave the penitentiary, because I was. I wish a system had been set up that could have determined that I was ready 40 years ago to leave the penitentiary, because I was.
What does that mean, ready?
Growth and development, maturation. As I said, I was a kid. And I know a lot of you guys are the same age I was then, or a little younger, or a little older. And as far as you're concerned, you're grown. Because that's what I thought. I said, I am grown. I do what a grown man does. Without really...
Spam.
I know what to do. I'm going to turn it all the way off. No, I can do it.
No, it's good. I got it.
You don't know how. Isn't that crazy?
Okay.
It's off completely. And it will not rain. I learned that much.
Okay.
And
I was with Irvin
oh,
24 hours after he was released from 52 years of imprisonment, and he got a phone in that moment with me. So
yes, I got this phone.
yeah. So anyway, thanks for
So-
teaching me stuff.
Again, growth and development. I had to reach a point where I understood that I was responsible for what I did. Up until that point, I didn't. And it really wasn't the penitentiary that taught me that. It wasn't. They could have let me out there a week after I was arrested. And if I had met the kind of people that I met in the penitentiary, I would have been okay. They could have let me go.
What was a week after?
Well, no, they could have let me go a week after, because if I had met the people that I had met, if I had met the sages, the wise men and women, if I had met the griots that could tell me stories and histories, who could tell me what was possible in terms of me, Irvin Moore. Because as far as I was concerned, I was just on the cusp of understanding that a lot of what we learn is a lie. It's a myth. It's set up just so someone can stay in power. And I had to learn that I am a human being.
You didn't believe that at the time?
Oh, I had no idea. I had no idea. I had no idea. I had to learn how precious life itself is. There is...
Can I just ask you a question?
Oh, of course.
So you're saying that somehow growth and maturation is at X period of time after this death occurred, when you'd matured to a particular place, you would have been able to be back on the street,
Of course.
and you would have been what? What would have been different?
I would have been an asset to my community.
In what way?
I would have been a person that people in my community could look at and say, be like him.
What would it have been like? Who would you have been?
Oh, I would have been me.
But I mean, like, what were you, and then what would you have been that would have? And I'm going to ask a different question
yes.
after this.
I
But
understand what you're saying. I was ignorant. And at a certain point, I stopped being ignorant. At a certain point of taking in what people were telling me, people were showing me, the realities of life, taking in what you learn in Social 119, taking in what you hear the conscientious and thoughtful friends and family members you have say. And instead of rebelling against it, as we all do as children, I said, wait a minute. I sat back and began to think about it. I often tell a story. Before we had radio in prison, before we had television in prison, before we had all of the thousands of things that they do have in prison, even though prisons are still prisons. And I don't wish it on anybody, with rare exception. But before we had all of that, when we could only talk to each other. I was fortunate enough to have a group of who we called old heads. I don't know what name you use for them. An ancient name is the elders. Prehistorically, all human tribes gravitated to and venerated the old ones in their community. Why? I mean, they weren't strong anymore. They couldn't bring food back. They couldn't protect the tribe physically, but they had the wisdom and from experience that you turn to when there are problems, when there are troubles, when there are doubt, when there's lack of confidence, when you just need to know something. You turn to your venerated elders. And you remember this, you guys that have grandparents. You remember this, you guys that have elders in your community that you walk by every day or when you're home and barely say hi to. But I was fortunate enough to have these people that we called old heads. And they saw something in me, as old heads do.
So,
Seems like we have a question.
yes, we do. So, what the direction that you're talking about, and what I would say, and what I did say to the Board of Pardons about you, Irvin, is that your life is a personal anthem to redemption and rehabilitation, because we like to use that word.
We do. We do.
And which we haven't defined yet. But what you're talking about is this kind of growth and development and waking up and becoming less ignorant and listening to the old heads that is in that realm to me. It's like what we wish when someone commits an act and they go to prison, we want to see rehabilitation. But, okay, there's no but to that. I think that what you have done in 52 years of incarceration is an anthem to that, is a representation, is what we would love to see, right? Okay, so, but I want to find out about, but what is justice? Because I'm imagining all of the people who have, not in this room necessarily, but in the world, whose loved ones have had their lives taken from them, right? And so, and plenty of them wouldn't care if you were rehabilitated. Some would, but they would say, we would still have the conversation of what is just, what is justice in this case. And so I still want to ask you that question of what is the word I had before? How does one pay for an offense, and to what degree have you paid?
Well, see, I am evidently more of a storyteller than this young lady here. You know,
I'm a facilitator.
She wants specific and distinct answers. I have a story to tell. Within my story are the answers that she seeks.
Exactly.
But she says we don't have enough time for that. And it's strange because since I've been home, and I say home, I'm from Philadelphia, I have not set foot there yet. I live here because of this young lady and her husband. I live in State College because of them, because of the possibility of me gaining employment here at Penn State University. So I devised my home plan to include State College and Penn State as possibilities in my life. And when the Board of Pardons says, okay, we're going to grant to you based on the 52 years of your exemplary existence in prison, and we're going to send you to the closest halfway house or community correction center where we're required to go to legislatively for 1 year. We're going to send you to the one that's closest to your home plan, which is in Johnstown. I know I haven't gotten to the answer yet, but
Is he avoiding my question?
I have to let them know what's happening.
That's good. That's
So
good.
I go to Johnstown Community Correction Center one day out of a week. I'm supposed to be there 365 days, but the powers that be, because of Laurie, because of Sam, because of other things and people in my life, it says, wait a minute. We all could be better served by having you go to your apartment in State College and come back and see us one day out of that week instead of you being here for the entire week. So my answer to that was, where do I sign? Because that's what happened. So I'm here in State College 6 days a week. 1 day a week I go back to Johnstown on the bus and sleep there and bring them back food and bring them back information, bring them back instruction, because there are 30, 40 guys there that are about to leave there and go home somewhere, and they need help. They need the kinds of things that we needed and that I received to a degree in the penitentiary. In terms of what is just.
For you, for your case.
No, but see, it's not just for me, it's just for the people involved.
Well, that's what I
See,
mean, the case.
Exactly. And it differs. It differs in all aspects.
Tell-
As you said, for the family members of the person whose life was taken, they say, we couldn't care less what this man did, how productive he's been in the penitentiary, how much he's educated himself, what he's brought to that environment there, how he's been evaluated and diagnosed by other people in terms of his growth and development. We don't care. He took our loved one. And I understand that. I do. I understand that, which is one of the reasons why I never killed myself, which is one of the reasons why I never went insane, which is one of the reasons why I did not deteriorate into a beast, as I've seen happen in
Wait, can you-
52 years, because justice for them is theirs, and it's something different. Now, the way the system is set up,
Wait, before you go to that, I just want to make sure, because you said something really potent, and I want to make sure we understand it. You're saying you didn't kill yourself, you didn't go crazy, you didn't become a beast because of the family, because of
no,
the...
because
what did you mean?
because I understood. I didn't say, wait a minute, I'm never coming home, because that's how the family feels. And some people did that. Some people...
Oh, you mean because they are the ones that are keeping you in...
Sure, because their opinion is, let him die there. Because the opinion of the courts, as you alluded at, no, as you said distinctly, in Pennsylvania, unlike 44 other states in our union, life is life. They don't say, we sentence you to life without the possibility of parole, because there's never been parole in Pennsylvania for lifers, ever. So they just say, I sentence you to life, and they mean until you die.
And some people call that death by incarceration.
Some people call that death by incarceration. And there are over 5,000 men and women in Pennsylvania serving life sentences. When I first came into the system, there were maybe 300 or 400. When I first came into the system, I know, bear with me, please. I get so much fun out of doing that to her and Sam, because I can, because I know they love me, and because I'm older than them,
Yes?
I'm their elder, and because Big Ray, which is Laurie's father, he and I are okay. You know, so there's certain liberties I can take. But when I first came into the system, there were 7 penitentiaries in the entire state. There were 300 lifers and 7,000 prisoners. Up until a very short period ago, there were 30 penitentiaries in the state. There was 55,000 prisoners. There were 5,000 men and women serving life, expected to die there. Again, because you are young, tax-paying citizens, you have to know that this comes at a cost. Now, Laurie is going to talk about the psychological and emotional and the cost on the human soul, and I'm going to aid her in that. But there's also a cost economically. And we have to consider that. Because if we want to make some sort of progressive and positive change to the system, economics has to be in the matrix.
So, okay. Okay. So I'm thinking of, so I want to just go back to this idea of the way we are thinking about justice in the world, social justice. This is a key concept, right? Wait, did he come yet? The person, Yiannopoulos, did he come yet, or is it this week? It's tomorrow? Okay.
Who?
The speaker whose name I can't say. Can you say it?
Oh, okay.
Milo.
The
Okay.
The controversial figure.
So we think about, you know, do you support this or do you not support it? Free speech, censored speech, all those things, right? And to a lot of us, it's simple, right? And I think that a lot of us think of justice in a similar way. But even Irvin's story, if you listen to it, and I have a story that I would love to add, there's so many ways in which you were victimized, right? So you were a victim, and then you were involved in a crime where you were the offender, and then there's ways where you're in prison and now you're a victim in other ways again, right? And you could be in prison and also continue to be an offender and a perpetrator. And so I think that Irvin's story has so many facets to it, which is not unusual. This is what it is. And so those of us who care about justice, like, we really have to ask him these questions. And we are going to open up the floor very soon. And I really invite you all to ask some challenging questions to Irvin, because he won't tell stories for you. He'll just answer your questions. But I really, let me just ask you, at what point did you pay for the crime? At what point or in what way?
Okay. I paid for the crime. At the point when I realized I was a human being. So we go back to what I said initially. They could have let me go 40 years ago.
Wait, how is that payment for the crime?
I paid for it because I was aware and responsible of who I was. Now, you had people sitting over here that said he can never pay for the crime. That's what I'm trying to get everyone to understand. People who say he will never be able to pay for the crime. You had some enlightened and progressive people, especially back in the 70s, who says, let him show us that he's ready to be returned back into the community. To do what? To be an asset in whatever community he returns to. And what do you mean by being an asset? Again, as I said, he will be no longer dangerous. He will no longer be a threat. He will be someone that the community can turn to when they are in need of example, of positiveness, and when they need wisdom through experience. He will be able to help guide his community, whatever community that is, into a better life. Now, you had a very small group of people who made changes in the 1970s when a term, rehabilitation, first began to be heard. Prior to that, there was no such, it was a word, of course, but in terms of a dynamic and a process, it didn't exist.
I want to.
Of course you can.
Yeah, I want to interrupt here. So I'm still on the, and I'm not going to ask you the same question because you are answering it. But I want us to think about, right? Because when I ask the question, like, have you paid? And we're all asking those questions. Have we paid? Somebody is hurt, we want to know who's to blame and who pays for that. Literally sometimes, right? I mean, we don't have this legal system that's in some ways out of control with lawyers because we don't have this idea that we have to blame someone and they have to pay. So So I think it's important when we think about that there's another way to do justice, which isn't just people paying, but it's also people restoring, because obviously a life can never be brought back. But I want to bring it down to like everyday things. If you lie to your parents, my dad always told me this, he says, if you break my trust, you can't get it back, because I always know that you could lie to me. Now, I lived by that because I wanted my dad's trust. But the point is, small things like that, you just like yell and really mean to your brother or sister or whomever, and we think we apologize and it goes away, but we always remember that. We always feel it, right? We get hurt and we have a scar. So when we think about justice and when we think about restorative justice, it's not, we can't ever pretend that we can make it better and go back to what it was, right? So punishment is one thing we do to pay for something. But when we talk about restorative justice, we're asking ourselves the question, what can we do not to pretend it didn't happen, but to build it back. Oh my God, it sounded like build back better. That sounded weird. But really, what can we do to rebuild? If I lied to my dad and he found out, what would we do? What would we need to do to rebuild the trust between us? And that is possible. It doesn't mean that that thing didn't happen, or if you hurt someone that didn't happen. And it doesn't just mean forgiveness. That's another word, but that we're not talking about. But we are talking about that humans are imaginative enough and creative enough, and it matters enough that we would take somebody like my friend Irvin and say, yeah, this thing happened. To what degree do you have to pay, and to what degree can you be part of making it better, making something better in the community that you have just hurt, that you've just offended, that you've broken trust in, whatever it is. If you're a kid and you break windows in somebody's house, right, what do we do to restore the relationship? So I just want to underline that there's this huge continuum that exists for how do we respond to things that hurt us, hurt each other. And it's punishment and time isn't the only thing. But yet you have gotten a lot of both of them, punishment and time.
Indeed.
And I've often asked lifers who I've gotten to talk to, because I've met many who have become, to my eyes, model citizens, deeply spiritual, thoughtful, compassionate, kind, and sensitive humans that I'd love to populate my neighborhood with. But I've also wondered, would you be that human if you hadn't gotten a life sentence? Would you have woken up? So I want to ask you that question.
Well, there's no way to answer that.
Okay, but
there's no way to ask
what could have happened if it would have.
Sure,
right. But
it's possible, of course, through a different kind of confluence of events. I could have still grown to be the person that I am today. I consider myself a good man. A good man who, when he was young, made a mistake, an egregious mistake. Now, I've grown and matured and become who I am, and I don't know if it was because I was in prison.
I'm saying it in some way facetiously or sort of ironically. I'm saying it ironically.
Of course, I understand. But again...
But I hear you. You don't think it's necessary. It's because you devoted yourself.
Now, and also, I preface this entire conversation by saying, well, first and foremost, we're having a conversation, she and I. We're not arguing. We're not debating an issue. We're having a very thoughtful and sometimes contentious conversation. Why? Because we want to present an issue as full as we possibly can and possibly solve some questions or some problems that may exist amongst this wonderful array and beautiful array of people, of students.
We should get their questions now.
Pardon?
I really want to hear what some of their questions are. Are you willing to take some now, or do you want to finish your thought? Because I love to interrupt.
Well, how much time do we have?
Just not that much. Like.
Oh, it's going already.
I know.
Well, maybe they can have us back.
Maybe.
Maybe they can have us back
Well-
so we can do this again. Because we're nowhere near finished.
Yeah, no, we're not.
And we're nowhere near letting you guys know how this entire issue impacts and affects your life, and your community, and your growth, and your development, and your future, you know? And so we would like to come back. But when you're ready, we
Yeah.
can start having them ask questions
Yeah,
if they want.
or comments.
Or make comments, or...
Can we, let's just do that. Let's open the floor to anybody who has comment, question. Yep.
There's a young man here with a wonderful
I saw you first.
display of finery on. Look at his clothes. Oh, you look so colorful.
Yeah, my question is that the victim's family, how much of an impact, if any, did they have in your pardon board or hearing or something like that?
How much impact did they have?
Yeah, like did they advocate for your release from prison, or were they not involved? Did they try to keep you in?
Well, since we're going to talk about me personally, I was fortunate. I was fortunate that they're from my neighborhood, and they knew me as a child. They know my family, and they long ago forgave me. They long ago followed my career in prison, and when I reached certain heights, certain pinnacles, certain accomplishments, they were there, you know, to applaud me. So I was lucky. That's not always the case. So I did have their help.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Good question.
Who else?
So I have a question. It's kind of like a broad question, so if you don't have an answer, that's completely fine because I don't really know the answer myself. But I really support restorative justice, but in a prison for profit and like privatized prison system, do you see that even being an option? Or since imprisonment is so profitable for privatized prisons, do you just not see punitive justice going away?
Get rid of prisons for profit, because that's what they're there for. They're there for profit. They're not there, they don't care about growth and development. They don't care about if someone has been rehabilitated. I mean, why should they? The more people they have, the more money they make. You know, there was a time when prisons were not on Wall Street as they are today. As I said, initially there were 7 prisons in this entire state, and it reached the pinnacle where there were 30. I started to say in terms of cost economically, because you guys are tax-paying members of this society, and prisons, the DOC, if I'm not mistaken, has the second largest budget in the state. Larger than education, larger than hospitals, medicine, larger than infrastructure, your roads, your bridges, your dams. At last count, $2.8 billion was set aside for DOC for last year. And it's recession-proof. It never goes down. It goes up every year. That's $2.8 billion of your money. Come on, we could do something better with. We can do something better with that money. So,
Irvin,
prison for profit.
So you're saying no prison for profit, but you're asking, like, given that it's profitable, can it change? You know, it changes if we start. I'm just going to say if we actually do the math and see where that money can go and serve in other ways. But that's you all. This is the
Indeed,
next.
indeed.
This is this generation's one of your tasks. So who else? Questions?
right.
Anybody over here?
Yo,
Comments?
hold on. I'm going to ask you a
We
question.
have a
Oh, I'm
question
sorry.
over here. We have a question over here.
Go ahead.
All right, so thank you for sharing your story, first off. It's profound and incredible. And a couple of the themes that I picked apart in your story were of personal transformation and redemption and the reorientation of one's life to a greater good. And my question to you is, how do you look at someone else and judge that they have gone through that kind of process? Because it's always obvious to the individual that, oh, I have transformed and I am born anew. But how do you look at someone else and evaluate the kind of journey that they've been through?
Well, certain things become obvious, first and foremost. during the span of time, how many people have you hurt? I mean, I know people that hurt people every day in there. I know people that have killed people in there, that have raped people in there. Now, have they done that in the last month, or 5 months, or 6 months, or a year? That's just one area of evaluation. Then you have experts. I mean, these are people who have been trained to do this. Psychoanalysts. People that can evaluate your motives, can evaluate exactly what you say. And you have boards that sit, and that's what they do. So there are certain things that, I mean, you can never be 100% sure of anything, because we have some people that can just out fake the fake. You know what I mean? But again, there's diagnostic and evaluative mechanisms that can be set up that can determine whether or not a guy is better or not. Whether or not he is, and I'm not talking about the crime, I'm talking about what he's done and what he's been doing with his life, with his actions for the past so-and-so. You know what I mean?
And I've seen Irvin and people like him, but Irvin be able to say, no, that guy's head's not on straight.
Oh.
This guy's head's on straight. Oh, he's on the path. Oh, no. Don't, you cannot do that. We cannot have you doing that. Like, he sees it. We need people to see. Wait.
Indeed.
There's a question up here. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I'm up here.
That's good.
So my question is, well, first of all, did you spend your entire sentence in Rockview?
No, I was at Graterford Prison. I don't know if any of you have heard of Graterford. It's legendary. It is. I was there for 26 years, and in 1995 I was transferred to Rockview, where I've been for the last 26 years. I was lucky enough to only be in 2 institutions that entire time.
So this past summer, I actually interned in the treatment department of Dauphin County Prison. And one of my favorite groups that we conducted, I spent a lot of time on I Block, which was a treatment block. And my favorite group that we did was we watched a documentary on drunk driving. And it was 2 high school seniors, and the boy ended up drunk driving and hitting and killing a girl who was at the same party. And his sentencing was unique in the way that the family actually asked that he not serve jail time. You're nodding your head. Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you guys watch it?
No, ma'am.
No, I didn't know if you guys did the same stuff. But we would talk about it afterwards, and his sentence was, instead of spending time in prison, the family asked that he send a check for $1 to them every week, because they said it wasn't right for his family to lose their child too, because of a stupid mistake that he made. But that way, he still had to think about their daughter. They knew that he had to still think about what he was doing. And the main point of our discussion was, did they think it was fair, or did they think it was unjust? Like, he didn't have to go to prison, and therefore he didn't get enough punishment. And I just wanted your opinion on that, because I feel like a lot of their opinions were because they were sitting in there, and so like that's not fair. But he might have suffered more being on the outside. So I was just wondering your opinion.
That was a good question. Again, it boils down to individualization, the person himself. I know people who have committed crimes who, as soon as they were arrested, or even before they were arrested, they knew they would never do that again. So, should we send them to prison because they did commit it and they'd never do it again? Because it was my thought that one of the primary reasons why we send someone to prison is, they're called places of correction, so that they can correct their thinking, correct their habits, correct what they do, so that they can stop doing what they did to get there in the first place. And if you have people who, and of course, I know we've all done it. We've done something wrong and said, oh, we may have gotten away with it. It says, that's it, I'm never doing that again. And we mean that. We mean that. But the act itself was still committed. So if we're talking about just and unjust crime and punishment, should we always imprison someone who has committed a crime? Always? No, I don't think so.
I just want to add in this, and I might have alluded to it earlier, but Irvin says really clearly, after many conversations with him, that there are some people who should never be out of prison.
Well,
that doesn't change the.
No, true, because that's why I says I am not an advocate of raising prisons to the ground. I'm not. That'd be insane. I have met, as I've told Laurie, and I've told you during the course of this day, that I have met angels, living angels in the corridors of the penitentiary. Saints and sages and wise people and holy people who have saved my life, who have helped guide me, who have restored my humanity. I would really, really, really love to see them out here where they could do the same thing, and they would. But I have seen demons. I have seen evil people who should never, never be allowed to walk out here with innocent people, ever again. I don't care what they did in there. They're evil people. So, it's my opinion.
There's a question over here.
Yeah, I just have a follow-up to the question that the gentleman in the front row asked. So you said that there are people that can evaluate those kinds of things and then you also said that you felt 40 years ago you would have been ready to leave. And my question is, why didn't you have that sort of evaluation process available to you? And, you know.
Good question. I mean, but it speaks to the system itself. There are processes that have been established for decades. And one is that a person who's serving a life sentence, especially in Pennsylvania, he has two means of being released. One, he dies. Two is executive clemency, which means the power of the governor to grant pardon or grant clemency. On the state level, it's the governor. On the national level, it's the president. A man who goes in front of the governor seeking clemency, according to the process that has been established for decades, should have at least 20 years served already. So whether or not this guy, whoever he was, found himself and says, wow, that's it, I am never doing that again. I am going to be an asset, I'm going to be a jewel in my community 5 years or 3 years or 2 years after he was arrested, it makes no difference. If he did put his papers, they say, oh, you don't have enough time, man. So that's one of the reasons why it didn't occur 40 years ago. Good question, thank you.
Who else?
And all these young, bright, beautiful minds in here, I know there's some other questions.
Go ahead.
My question for you is, what was the first meal you had when you got out, and have you been to McDonald's yet?
I'm glad you asked that. I am so glad you asked that, because when we finally did get televisions,
Irvin, just closer to your mouth. It's just hard.
when we finally were able to see a television, and this happened in 1974 or 75. I was arrested in 1969. It was like looking at I don't know what to say. It's just like this phone that I'm still amazed with now, you know. So I saw a commercial on television, and a little jingle. I said, oh, and I looked at it. I said, I got to have that. And I've been watching that commercial for decades, because something like that we would never have in there. And that was 2 all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. I said, I got to get me a Big Mac. To the point that when I went up for commutation and we're sitting in the conference room, I'm waiting to go down to see the board, And the lieutenant governor, I don't know if you've met him. He's a bear of a man, 6'7", huge. And it was freezing cold. He was there with a pair of short pants on and no socks. I said, "Who is this fool?" And he said, I heard you want one of them Big Macs. He said, and he did like that, and then this little tingle ran through my body because I said, this is the second to the chief operating officer of this state. And he's giving me the thumbs up. I said, oh, you know, we cling to hope in any kind of way that we can see it. You know, I don't know how much time we got, but this is going to be fast. It's going to be fast. Because I often tell people.
Wait, but did you tell him? Are you telling him about the Big Mac
Oh,
story?
and he says, no, he said, I heard that you
No,
want to get they asked me what meal did I eat.
Yeah.
Didn't say what the result was. I don't want to do that.
Oh, okay. We have 1 minute, by the way.
I want 1 minute. Okay. All right. Another question, please.
One more.
Well, this was so nice. This is so nice talking to you guys.
But I feel like you didn't tell the good part about the Big Mac story.
That's the part I don't want to say.
Oh, okay. All right.
Hey, I don't want to dash dreams. Some of these people really love Big Mac.
No, no, no. You need to dash their dreams. It was terrible.
Hey,
The moral of the story, or the ending of the story, is that it tasted terrible. So
He's not getting another Big Mac.
I have never eaten another.
all right, Irvin, thank you, and Laurie, both of you,
Thank you, Irvin.